By the 3 moons of Varix Prime, I never thought I would witness something so utterly absurd. My name is Keth97, Senior Tactical Analyst for the Galactic Predator Research Division, and after 47 standard cycles of studying the most dangerous creatures across 17 star systems, I thought I had seen everything. Oh, how magnificently wrong I was. The creature before me defied every logical protocol in our extensive database, standing barely 1.7 meters tall, with impossibly thin limbs and a skull that looked like it might crack if you sneezed too hard. This human female named Mira Kane appeared about as threatening as a Terran houseplant. Yet here she was, staring down a fully grown Shadowmaw alpha, and she was smiling. Not just any smile, mind you. This was the kind of expression that made my secondary nervous system start twitching involuntarily. The kind that suggested she knew something the rest of us did not, and that something was probably going to make us all very uncomfortable very soon. The Shadowmaw, for those fortunate enough to never encounter one, stands 3 meters at the shoulder. Its obsidian hide can deflect plasma rounds, its talons can slice through reinforced titanium like soft cheese, and its bite force registers at approximately 4,000 pounds per square inch. This particular specimen had been terrorizing shipping lanes for 6 months, leaving behind nothing but scrap metal and very unpleasant stains. And yet, as it let out a bone-rattling growl that should have sent any rational being sprinting for the nearest exit, Mira Kane just giggled. Actually giggled. "Oh, you poor baby," she cooed, taking a step forward. "Are you having a bad day?" My colleague 042 nearly fell out of her observation pod. "Is she talking to it?" She whispered through our comm channel, her voice pitched about 3 octaves higher than usual. "I believe she is," I replied, watching in fascination as the human continued her approach. This should be interesting. The Shadowmaw's confusion was almost palpable. Here was prey that was not running, screaming, or pleading for mercy. Instead, it was making soft, nonsensical sounds and moving closer. The creature's primitive brain struggled to process this deviation from expected behavior. Mira reached into her jacket, and every weapon system in our research facility automatically targeted her position. What she pulled out, however, was not a plasma rifle or molecular disruptor. It was a small, rectangular object that appeared to be some sort of Terran food item. "I bet you are hungry," she said, unwrapping what our scanners identified as processed meat, salt, and various preservatives. "When was the last time someone gave you a proper meal instead of trying to blast holes in you?" The Shadowmaw tilted its massive head, genuinely perplexed. In 47 cycles of research, I had never seen one of these apex predators look confused. Aggressive, yes. Homicidal, absolutely. But confused. The confused, this was entirely new territory. "Thea, you know," Mira continued conversationally, as if she were chatting with a neighbor over morning stimulants. "Back on Earth, we had these things called wolves. Big, scary predators that everyone was afraid of. But you know what we figured out. Most of the time, they just wanted to be left alone, and sometimes, if you were really lucky, they just wanted a friend." She tossed the food item toward the creature. It landed about 2 meters in front of the Shadowmaw, who stared at it as if it might explode, which, given the circumstances, was not an entirely unreasonable assumption. "She cannot be serious," Zira muttered. "Does she think she can domesticate a class of predator with snack food?" "Apparently she does," I replied, making rapid notes on my datapad. "This is either brilliant or suicidal." "And?" "Not a do, possibly both." The Shadowmaw sniffed cautiously at the offering. Its enhanced olfactory sensors analyzed the chemical composition, cross-referenced it with known toxins, and apparently decided it was safe. With surprising delicacy for something with claws the size of vibro swords, it picked up the food and consumed it in one bite. Mira clapped her hands together. "Good boy. See? That was not so hard, was it?" The creature's reaction was immediate and completely unexpected. Its aggressive posture relaxed slightly, and it made a sound I had never heard from a Shadowmaw before. It's a sort of rumbling purr that vibrated through the deck plating. "Impossible," Zira breathed. They do not make that sound, ever. Ever. Apparently they do, I corrected, frantically updating our behavioral database when provided with food by non-threatening entities. But Mira was not finished. She reached into her other pocket and produced another item, this one metallic and curved. Our sensors identified it as some sort of grooming implement. Now, let me take a look at those scales, she said, approaching the now docile predator. I bet they itch something terrible, do they not? When was the last time anyone helped you with maintenance? What happened next will haunt my dreams for the remainder of my natural lifespan. This human, this fragile little creature, who could be crushed by a casual swipe of the Shadowmaw's tail, began methodically grooming the monster. And the monster enjoyed it. The purring grew louder. The creature actually lowered itself to the deck to give her better access to its dorsal ridge. When she found a particularly troublesome spot between its shoulder blades, it stretched its neck and made a sound that could only be described as blissful. This is unprecedented, I muttered, my data recorder working overtime. We need to contact the High Council immediately. Wait, Zira said, pointing at her scanner. Look at the biochemical readings. I checked my own instruments and felt my respiratory organs skip several cycles. The Shadowmaw's stress hormones had dropped to nearly undetectable levels, while its oxytocin production had increased by over 300%. For those unfamiliar with biochemistry, oxytocin is commonly known as the bonding hormone. The apex predator was forming an emotional attachment to its groomer. You are such a good boy, Mira was saying, working on a particularly stubborn patch of dried mud between the creature's scales. I bet nobody ever told you that before, did they? Everyone just sees the big scary teeth and claws. But I see those intelligent eyes. You are not a monster, are you? You are just misunderstood. The Shadowmaw responded by gently nudging her with its massive head, nearly knocking her over in the process. She laughed and scratched behind what passed for its ears. Messed. Careful there, big guy. I am tougher than I look, but I am not invincible. At this point, I should mention that our facility's containment protocols had been completely forgotten. The force field barriers were still active, but nobody was manning the weapons systems anymore. The entire research staff was crowded around the observation windows, watching in stunned silence as a human accomplished what decades of military research had failed to achieve. She had tamed a Shadowmaw with nothing but kindness and snack food. How is this possible? Dr. Vel Prime, our chief xenobiologist, whispered over the comm. Every psychological profile indicates that Shadowmaws are incapable of forming social bonds. Every profile based on encounters where they were being hunted, I corrected. Perhaps we have been approaching this all wrong. Mira finished her grooming session and stepped back to admire her work. The Shadowmaw's scales gleamed like polished obsidian, and its posture had completely transformed. Gone was the aggressive stance of a cornered predator. In its place was something almost protective. There you go. Handsome, she said, giving the creature a final pat. Do you feel better now? The Shadowmaw's response was to position itself between Mira and the observation deck, as if shielding her from potential threats. Its eyes swept the facility, and I swear I saw recognition there. It knew we were watching, and it was making sure we understood that harming the human would be a very poor decision. Fascinating, I murmured. It has adopted a guardian posture. Guardian posture? Zira asked. Behavioral pattern observed in pack animals when protecting valued members of their social group. But Shadowmaws are solitary hunters. They do not form packs. They do now, Dr. Vel Prime observed dryly. As if to prove his point, the Shadowmaw settled into a resting position that allowed it to keep watch over the entire chamber while remaining close to Mira. She had somehow convinced one of the galaxy's most feared predators to become her personal bodyguard, and she did it in less than 20 minutes. Well, Mira said, addressing the observation deck directly, I assume you all got whatever data you needed, because I think my new friend here is getting a little anxious about all the staring. Indeed, the Shadowmaw had begun to emit low warning growls whenever our staff moved too quickly past the windows. Not the aggressive roars from before, but the kind of sounds a protective animal makes when strangers get too close to something precious. I activated the external communication system. Miss Kane, we need to understand how you accomplished this. Our records indicate that Shadowmaws cannot be domesticated. She shrugged, scratching the creature under its chin as if it were an oversized house cat. Your records are wrong. Everything can be domesticated if you approach it right. You just have to remember that underneath all the scary exterior, most creatures just want the same basic things: food, comfort, and someone who does not immediately try to kill them. The simplicity of her statement was almost insulting. Centuries of xenobiological research, countless studies on predator behavior, millions of credits spent on containment and control systems, and the solution was, be nice to them. It cannot be that simple. Dr. Vel Prime protested. Why not? Mira asked. You people have been studying these creatures like they are weapons or monsters. But what if they are not? What if they are just animals trying to survive in a universe that keeps shooting at them? As if responding to her words, the Shadowmaw nuzzled against her shoulder and settled more comfortably into its protective stance. The message was clear. This human was under its protection now, and anyone who wanted to harm her would have to go through 3 meters of claws, teeth, and very bad attitude. The implications are staggering, I muttered, already composing my report in my head. If humans can form bonds with class of predators this easily, then maybe, Zira finished quietly, we have been asking the wrong questions about humanity all along. The Shadowmaw's eyes fixed on mine through the observation window, and I felt a chill run down my spine. There was intelligence there, yes, but also something else, a promise, perhaps, or a warning. Either way, one thing was abundantly clear. Mira Kane had just changed everything we thought we knew about both predators and humans. 3 weeks later, I found myself questioning every fundamental principle of xenobiology I had ever learned. The incident report I submitted to the High Council had been met with skepticism, demands for verification, and several strongly worded suggestions that I submit myself for psychological evaluation. Then they sent Admiral Rex Prime to see for himself, standing in the same observation deck where we had first witnessed the impossible. The Admiral watched through reinforced transparent steel as Mira Kane went about her daily routine. What had once been a sterile containment facility now resembled something between a veterinary clinic and a very unusual pet sanctuary. Explain to me again, the Admiral said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen far too much bureaucratic nonsense in his career. How a single human female has turned our most secure research facility into a, what are you calling it, rehabilitation center? I replied, checking my notes for the 100th time. She insists that most of the creatures we classify as irredeemable predators are simply suffering from what she terms behavioral issues stemming from environmental stressors. The Admiral's expression suggested he was developing a headache. Environmental stressors. That is correct, sir. Through the observation window, we watched as Mira approached a void ripper that had been captured just 2 days earlier. These creatures were considered so dangerous that our standard protocol was immediate termination upon capture. They possessed the ability to phase partially out of our dimensional space, making them nearly impossible to contain and absolutely impossible to predict. Mira was carrying a basket of what appeared to be exotic fruits. She cannot be serious, the Admiral muttered. I am afraid she is entirely serious, sir, 042 replied from her monitoring station. She claims that void rippers phase shift when they are anxious, and that anxiety is typically caused by nutritional deficiencies. The void ripper in question was currently flickering in and out of visible reality, its form shifting between solid matter and something that made our sensors scream in electronic protest. Standard procedure would be to flood the chamber with quantum disruptors until the creature stopped existing in any recognizable form. Instead, Mira sat down on the floor about 3 meters away and began humming. Actually humming. The effect was immediate and completely inexplicable. The Void Ripper's phase shifting began to slow, its form stabilizing as it focused on the human. Mira continued her soft melody while casually sorting through her fruit basket, occasionally holding up different items as if considering which one might be most appealing. "What is she doing?" Admiral Rex Prime asked. "Music therapy," I replied, feeling slightly ridiculous. "She believes that certain tonal frequencies can induce calm states in agitated creatures. And does it work?" I gestured toward the chamber, where the Void Ripper had now fully materialized and was cautiously approaching the humming human. "You tell me, sir." Mira selected a purple fruit roughly the size of her fist and rolled it gently toward the creature. The Void Ripper stopped, sniffed the offering with what passed for nostrils, then consumed it with surprising delicacy. "Good boy, Flicker," she said, using the name she had apparently assigned to the creature. "See how much better you feel when you are not jumping between dimensions every 5 seconds." The creature, which according to every tactical manual should have been tearing through the facility's hull by now, settled into a relaxed posture and made a sound that could only be described as contented. "Flicker?" the Admiral asked weakly. "She names them," I explained. "All of them. The Shadowmaw is called Storm, the pair of crystal spiders are Gem and Ruby, and the Plasma Wolf goes by Spark." "We have a Plasma Wolf in containment?" "Not exactly containment anymore, sir. More like voluntary residence." As if summoned by our conversation, a sleek creature with fur that literally crackled with electrical energy padded into view. Plasma wolves were known for their tendency to discharge lethal amounts of bioelectricity when threatened, making them extremely dangerous to approach. This one was carrying a toy in its mouth. "Is that?" the Admiral began. "A squeaky toy?" "Yes, sir," Zura confirmed. "Miss Kane fabricated it using synthesized rubber compounds. Apparently, plasma wolves have a strong play drive that has never been properly studied because researchers keep trying to subdue them with tranquilizers." The plasma wolf dropped its toy at Mira's feet and sat expectantly, its tail wagging in a manner that would have been adorable if not for the small lightning bolts dancing along its fur. Mira laughed and threw the toy across the chamber. The plasma wolf bounded after it with obvious joy, its electrical discharge harmlessly grounding into the specially modified floor panels. "This is insane," Admiral Rex Prime said. "These creatures are classified as weapons of mass destruction." "Were classified," I corrected. "Miss Kane has requested that we reclassify them as misunderstood wildlife with specialized needs." The Admiral turned to stare at me. "And what does the High Council think of that suggestion?" Before I could answer, an alarm began sounding throughout the facility, not the standard alert for containment breach or system failure, but the specific tone reserved for incoming hostile vessels. "Admiral," came the voice of our communications officer over the facility intercom, "we have a problem. 3 Razorclaw hunting ships just dropped out of hyperspace. They are demanding we surrender our research specimens immediately." The Razorclaw Consortium was notorious throughout the galaxy for their illegal exotic creature trade. They captured rare and dangerous species for wealthy collectors who treated living beings as trophies. Apparently, word of our unusual research subjects had reached the wrong ears. "How long until our defense grid is operational?" the Admiral barked. "Defense grid is down for maintenance, sir. We are essentially defenseless." Through the observation window, I watched as Mira's collection of former predators responded to the stress in the facility. Storm, the Shadowmaw, rose to his feet and moved protectively closer to his human companion. Flicker began phase shifting again, but not from anxiety this time. His form flickered with what looked suspiciously like anger. Spark the plasma wolf had stopped playing and was now growling, electrical energy crackling more intensely around his frame. Even Gem and Ruby, the crystal spiders, had emerged from their preferred corner and were positioning themselves strategically around the chamber. "Sir," Zira said, her voice tight with surprise, "you need to see these readings." The Admiral moved to her station and looked at the displays. His face went pale. "Are these power levels accurate?" "Triple-checked, sir. Storm's bioelectric output has increased by 400%. Flicker is generating quantum distortions that are off our measurement scale. And Spark is producing enough electrical energy to power a small city." I felt a cold realization settle in my stomach. They know. Know what? The Admiral asked, that their friend is in danger. These creatures have formed a protective bond with Miss Kane. If the Razor Claw ships attempt to take her. My sentence was interrupted by the facility's hull shuddering under weapons fire. The Razor Claw ships had opened fire, attempting to disable our shields and board the station. That was when Mira Kane did something that redefined my understanding of human psychology. Instead of panicking or seeking shelter, she walked calmly to the chamber's communication panel and addressed her unusual companions. "All right, everyone," she said, her voice carrying the kind of calm authority that made trained soldiers snap to attention. "It looks like some very rude people want to hurt our family. What do you think we should do about that?" The response was immediate and terrifying. Storm roared, a sound that resonated through the facility's structure and probably carried into space. Flicker phase shifted partially out of dimensional reality, becoming something that existed in multiple probability states simultaneously. Spark's electrical aura expanded until he resembled a living storm cloud, while Gem and Ruby began weaving something that looked suspiciously like a web made of crystallized energy. "Miss Kane," I said through the intercom, my voice embarrassingly high-pitched, "what are you doing?" She looked up at the observation deck and smiled that same unsettling expression she had worn 3 weeks ago. "Taking my friends for a walk." The chamber's containment doors, which should have been impossible to open without proper authorization codes, simply slid open. Mira walked out, followed by 5 of the most dangerous creatures in known space, all of them moving with the coordinated purpose of a military unit. "Stop them," Admiral Rex Prime shouted, but it was too late. The group moved through the facility's corridors like they owned the place. Storm took point, his massive frame clearing the path while his senses scanned for threats. Flicker phased in and out of reality, apparently scouting alternate dimensional spaces for potential ambush points. Spark maintained a perimeter of electrical energy that would fry any hostile electronics. Lonelistis, Ipolice, Balo, Izidably. While Gem and Ruby had somehow managed to set up crystalline sensor nodes at key intersection points. They were not just protecting Mira. They were coordinating a defensive strategy that would have impressed a seasoned military tactician. "How are they doing this?" The Admiral whispered. "Pack behavior," I said, finally understanding. Humans are naturally pack bonding species. When they form social groups, they instinctively organize into efficient cooperative units. Miss Kane has not just tamed these creatures, she has made them into a pack. The facility shook again as the Razor Claw ships attempted to breach our outer hull. Through the security monitors, we watched as Mira and her unusual family reached the main docking bay. What happened next will be recounted in tactical academies for generations to come. The Razor Claw boarding party, expecting to face minimal resistance from a research facility, instead encountered something that defied all logical explanation. Storm met them head-on, his obsidian hide deflecting their plasma weapons while his claws turned their powered armor into expensive scrap metal. Flicker phased through their defensive positions, appearing behind enemy lines to create havoc among their rear guard. His ability to exist in multiple dimensional states meant that conventional weapons simply passed through him, while his claws very definitely did not pass through their equipment. Spark turned the docking bay into an electrical storm that overloaded every piece of technology the Raiders had brought. Their weapons, communications, and life support systems all failed simultaneously, leaving them effectively helpless. Gem and Ruby had somehow created a crystalline maze that trapped half the boarding party in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. The Raiders found themselves unable to move forward, backward, or apparently think clearly enough to find an exit. And through it all, Mira Kane stood calmly in the center of the chaos, occasionally offering gentle corrections to her friend's techniques. "Storm, try not to actually kill anyone if you can help it," she called out as the Shadowmaw picked up a raider and prepared to demonstrate why his species was feared throughout the galaxy. "Just make them very sorry they came here." Storm grumbled, but settled for shaking the raider until his weapons fell out and then depositing him in an unconscious heap. "Flicker, that phase-shifting thing you are doing is really disturbing their equilibrium." Can you make them dizzy enough to give up without actually giving them brain damage? The Void Ripper adjusted his dimensional phasing, and suddenly the remaining raiders found themselves so disoriented they could barely stand, let alone fight. Within 15 minutes, the entire Razorclaw boarding party had been neutralized without a single fatality. They were unconscious, weaponless, and thoroughly defeated, but they would live to reconsider their career choices. The Admiral and I made our way down to the docking bay, accompanied by what remained of our security staff. What we found was Mira Kane sitting on a crate, sharing what appeared to be sandwiches with her pack of former apex predators. "Miss Kane," the Admiral said, his voice carefully controlled, "we need to talk." She looked up and smiled. "Of course, Admiral. But first, I think you should probably call the Galactic Wildlife Protection Agency. These Razorclaw people have some very unhappy creatures aboard their ships, and I believe they deserve better care." As if to emphasize her point, the sounds of various roars, howls, and otherworldly screams began emanating from the captured raider vessels. "You want us to liberate their cargo?" I asked. "I want us to expand the rehabilitation program," she corrected. "There are probably dozens of creatures out there who just need someone to treat them with basic kindness instead of fear." Storm rumbled contentedly and nuzzled against her shoulder. Spark wagged his tail, sending small lightning bolts cascading harmlessly around the docking bay. Flicker had stabilized completely and was purring in a way that suggested dimensional travel could be quite pleasant when you were not running for your life. "Miss Kane," Admiral Rex Prime said finally, "I believe we need to discuss a significant change in your job description." She grinned. "I was hoping you would say that, and that, fellow beings, is how humanity accidentally revolutionized our understanding of predator management, interspecies diplomacy, and the fundamental power of simply being nice to things that could easily eat you. The universe, it turns out, makes a lot more sense when you approach it with friendship rather than fear. Who knew?"